G'day guys, I've just returned from the Australian ITC Championships where I took home Best in Faction for Chaos Space Marines. So what I wanted to do was release a 9-part series where I'm going to break down the list that I ran to this event to achieve these results with the new changes that are forced upon the Chaos Space Marine players by Arcs of Omen. I'm going to talk about what changes I made to the list to match this new season and how I went about it, what the list was designed to do, those sorts of things. Then I'm going to do a separate installment for each game that we played in this 8-round ITC major event. And basically I'm going to talk about the list that my opponent ran, the results that we got during the game, and the various strategies and situations that led to those results being achieved. So this will be similar to the Men's Masquerade series that I did after I won that GT, but much longer and hopefully much more interesting in a lot of detail. So with that being said, let's just jump straight into the video.
Welcome to the Black God.
G'day guys, welcome to installment number 7 in my Arcs of Omen Black Legion Australian ITC Championships Best in Faction fucking series. What a mouthful that is. I will find a way to condense that for the thumbnail. But basically in today's installment we're going to be talking about my round 7 game, and we're going to be talking about my round 6 game, sorry, we're up to round 6, installment 7, because the first installment we talked about my list, and then we basically broken it down to do a separate installment for each round. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the list that I versed in round 6, we're going to be talking about the scoreboard, and we're going to be talking about the various strategies and tactics that got that score. And if you haven't seen the first installment of this series, I highly recommend you go back and watch that one first, because in that one, I break down my Black Legion list in great detail. I talk about every unit, I talk about every relic, every stratagem, every combo that I planned, and how it's all supposed to go together. In this installment, I'm just talking about this one specific matchup, so I want to break it down in a lot of detail, and the best way to do that is to do a separate installment for each. So yeah. With that being said, make sure you check out that first one first, and if you have already checked that out, let's get stuck into the list. So I played Lachlan Rigg and his Dark Angels. So this is the second Dark Angels player that I versed in the event, and if you remember the episode with the first one, you'll have a bit of an understanding on how nervous I was going into this. So he had an Arcs of Omen detachment, which was an Adeptus Astartes Dark Angels detachment. He had Azrael with no Warlord traits, which was interesting. He had a Ravenwing Talon Master with Arbiter's Gaze and Rites of War. He had a second Ravenwing Talon Master. Then he had an Infiltrator Squad, just 5-man with a Helix Gauntlet. Then he basically had 3 units of Ravenwing Black Knights. There was a couple of units of 5 and a unit of 4. And they had all the tools, the Huntmaster, the Talons, the Grenade Launchers, the Corvus Hammers, all that good shit. Then he had a Ravenwing Champion, who was a chapter champion with the Blade of Triumph, the Imperium Sword, and a Grenade Launcher. He had 3 units of Inceptors, sorry. These are the Plasma Inceptors that were the big bads at the time, but have since been nerfed by GW. He had 1 unit of 6, which he combat squatted, and then 2 units of 5. Then he had a Ravenwing Dark Shroud, which gives an aura of -1 to hit, very powerful choice. And he had 2 Landspeeder Vengeance with Assault Cannons. So, a very different list than Adam Camilleri's, the one that destroyed me in the previous round. Adam had 2 big units of Black Knights, whereas Lachlan's gone for 3 smaller units, and then some slight tech choices with the different support vehicles. But other than that, relatively similar list. However, one of the things Lachlan had that Adam didn't have was a whole ton of Plasma Inceptors. Now these guys were particularly powerful in Dark Angels because they can Weapons of the Dark Age to get those plasma guns up to damage 3, which is really terrifying prospect. So let's have a look at the scoreboard, and then we'll break down the game specifics and the specific instances that led to these scores. Alright, I got an 87-point win to Lockie's 77-point loss. So for primary, I scored 32 with 8 on the sub-primary. I took Warp Ritual, which I maxed out for 12 points. I took No Prisoners, for which I scored 10 points. And I took Behind Enemy Lines, for which I scored 15, giving me a grand total of 87. Lockie took primary out for 24 points, and he got 6 points off the mission-specific sub-primary. Then he took Oaths of Moment, for which he scored 12. He took Codex Warfare, for which he scored 10. And he took Shock Tactics, for which he scored 15, giving him a total of 77 victory points. Alright, so basically the way this game worked is I again put everything in strat reserves except for the Terminators, teleported up into the center of the table, got all my buffs up, but I made a few very specific choices in this, knowing that the Dark Angels have the capacity to actually blow through that Terminator unit, which Adam showed me in round 2. So basically, one of the key differences is that Lockie didn't have any sources of Ignore's cover. So basically, when I teleported the Terminators up, I made sure that every single one of them was touching cover. And then in my first turn, I also made sure that almost all of them could see one of the units of Black Knights, and I shot that first and killed it. I left the Infiltrators alive, I left the other pieces alive, and I was like, I just need to kill these Black Knights, because they're the ones that deal the damage. Then we went over into Lockie's turn, and he killed like 3 or 4 Terminators, because basically I was getting those cover saves, he didn't have Ignore's cover, and he also wasn't as bold as Adam and didn't want to overcharge his weapons. Adam made the correct call and overcharged everything because he figured even if half of his army dies in the process, if he can kill my Terminators, it's game over. Whereas Lockie was a bit more conservative and he didn't overcharge, and as a result, he didn't do very much damage to my Terminators. And the reason that overcharging is particularly bad against Terminators, and the reason a lot of people shy away from it, is because you can't reroll to hit versus Illusory Supplication Terminators. Which means if you roll a 1, you're dead, and you can't reroll it. Whereas a lot of them stick by their reroll bubbles, so they don't want to, and that allows them to overcharge without the risk of dying. But that doesn't work on the Chaos Space Marine Terminators. And yeah, basically Lockie he shied away from it. He's like, no, I'm not going to overcharge. I'm just going to do chip damage to him. And as a result, he only killed it's like 3 or 4 or something like that in his first turn. Then in my second turn, I was able to put Advance and Charge on the Terminators instead of Illusory Supplication, send them out, advance, and go for a charge and try to kill a second unit of Black Knights. And my theory was that if a Terminators killed that unit of Black Knights, first turn they killed that unit, and then it's now my second turn, so the Hellbrutes and the Decimators come on and kill the third unit. Now I will have removed all of his Black Knights from the table, which means those Terminators are nowhere near as vulnerable and therefore don't need Illusory Supplication as much. So I basically did that, killed all of them, and there was a really interesting play. In my first turn, we were playing Data Scry Salvage, right? The one where there's the diagonal objectives down the center of the table. And basically, I first turn moved and advanced a unit of cultists up so that they were stringing out across those 2 objective markers, but I intentionally put a few of them within 6 inches of a table edge and out of line of sight for most of his army, right? In Lockie's turn, he shot them down, killed there was 4 of them left, all of which were out of line of sight, which meant he couldn't shoot at them anymore. So they were just sitting there. And he's like, oh, it's fine. They'll probably just die to morale and whatever, right? Rolled my morale check, failed, 1 more dies. Rolls my, combat attrition, a couple more die from that, leaving me with, I think I had 2 left, right? And neither of them were holding any objectives anymore because I had to pull casualties from the objectives because they were in line of sight. So I got these 2 cultists out of line of sight but not holding any objectives. We then go over into my turn 2, and Lockie goes to put in the scores for me having a 0-point primary. And I was like, well, hang on a sec. Primary is scored in the command phase. I also have a stratagem that I can use in the command phase to return D3 plus 3 cultists to the unit. So basically what I did is I rolled that, I rolled hot, I rolled a 5, which meant I get 6 cultists back to the unit, which then meant I was able to go, cool, well, these 2 are going to go onto that objective, completing coherency, and then I'm going to string the rest out and put 2 on that objective. So I'm now back holding both of those objectives, which means I get my big 4-point primary, which was big in this game because it was relatively close throughout the first few turns. So I got my primary. And also it meant that I now had a unit of cultists over there, which he had no way of interacting with in my turn, which meant when it ticks over to his turn, he actually doesn't control those 2 objectives because I have objective secured models on them. So not only was I getting victory points for myself, but I was denying victory points to him, and it was with a humble unit of cultists. And that was a huge swing in the game. That was really, really powerful. The other huge swing in this game was he basically, the Terminators advanced and charged and left all my characters behind. He then dropped a bunch of his stuff to try to kill those characters, but bounced, wasn't able to successfully kill them. And then in my next turn, the Terminators he basically moved everything of his outside of the Terminator's charge range, which he calculated based off a 5-inch move and a 12-inch charge. He's going, cool, he's going to be outside of 17. There's no way that I can charge him, right? That was his theory. Which he didn't ask me any questions. I would have told him if he did, but he didn't ask me any questions. He just was, I could see what he was doing. He's measuring stuff, right? Then we go into my turn, and I basically go, okay, cool. These Terminators are going to advance. I roll a 5 for the advance. Then this Dark Apostle is going to advance over so that he's within range of the Terminators. And I'm going to spend 2 CP to put the advance and charge prayer on those Terminators, because you can do it outside of phase. So even though during the command phase, when you would normally do the prayer, he was ages away, because both of them advanced, they were able to sort of meet, but string out. And then I was able to get a big charge onto his home objective and blow up a whole bunch of stuff there. So that little combo was really, really effective way of bringing those Terminators back into the battlefield. And it was something that he just thoroughly did not see coming. And to be fair, I didn't even think of it during his turn. While he was doing all of his moves, I was just like, yeah, cool. Because I was expecting that Dark Apostle to die to shooting. So he's moving outside of my charge range. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. The Terminators are going to do nothing in my turn, you know, because the characters are going to die and the Terminators are whatever. But given that he failed to kill them, to kill the characters, that actually made me think, well, hang on, now I actually can go in for that charge. So that was a really big swing in the game as well. That was a pivotal moment. Other pivotal moments, I guess, was there was a Hellbrute that was able to shoot shoot when targeted and able to kill some in Plasma Inceptors. So he basically shot at me with like one of his Talon Master land speeder guys, didn't kill me, but then I was able to shoot back, and the Plasma Inceptors were closer, so I was able to get +1 to hit on them and shoot them, killed a bunch of them before they were able to shoot at my characters, which is in turn one of the things that kept my characters alive, which was in turn one of the things that allowed the character to put the advance in charge. So it's like set off this positive chain reaction of events that were really advantageous to me, thanks to the Hellbrute being able to shoot when targeted. So that was really, really amazing. And then, yeah, there was a few instances where my dice were really, really hot, and I rolled really good dice, like a few clutch advances. I made a few really big charges, big 9-inch charges on the Hellbrutes coming from Deep Strike, that sort of stuff. Yeah, really, really interesting game. Those Plasma Inceptors are no joke. They do a lot of damage. I, for one, am glad that they've gone back up in points. And yeah, so that more or less sums up my second round into the Dark Angels. So I lost the first round versus Dark Angels, but then I learned my lessons and I applied them in the second game, and that was able to generate a win. Now, Lockie is also a state captain, as was Jack. So Lockie's the state captain for Western Australia in the Australian Team Championships, and I'm the state captain for Victoria. So in this day, I was able to claim 2 skulls of enemy captains. So I felt like a true world eater. Even though I was playing Black Legion, it still felt appropriate for this channel. So I was really excited with that. Lockie's an absolute legend of a bloke. Yeah, we had a sick game. I look forward to more games with him. And I hope you guys found that interesting. If you did, make sure to head over to the Patreon. Make sure to like and subscribe. In the Patreon, we're doing a giveaway this month where we're giving away a 3D printed Angron. So if you want to get him in your hands before the World Eaters Codex even hits the shelves, check out the Patreon. I think you can subscribe for as low as $4 at the moment, and that automatically gets you into the competition. And the plan is to have that model in your hands before the Codex hits the shelves so that you can build it, paint it, get it ready for the tabletop so that when that Codex is in your hands, you can hit the table running from day one. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoyed that, and I look forward to the next part of this installment series on the Australian ITC Championships. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Welcome to the Black God.